Hi, I'm Heather Kelly, an Extension Plant Pathologist for University of Tennessee. Thank you for attending the cotton tour virtually. I'm going to be talking about disease identification and management strategies for them. And so you have to examine an entire plant to really understand what's going on and to identify a disease. And there's many different areas of a plant that different diseases affect. So I'm going to cut this talk into a couple different sections, and we're going to start with below ground disease issues. And so that includes seedling diseases and nematodes. And so starting with seedling diseases first. And so with that, seedling diseases, as you can see even in later growth of cotton, you can have spots where plants have completely died, and or you even might have plants that have definitely reduced in vigor, that are smaller than the rest of the plant stand. And that can be caused from your initial plant date and issues due to seedling diseases. There are 4 main seedling diseases. I'm not going to go into each one of them. More detail and symptomology for each one of these can be seen in the myelin no-till presentation, where it's seedling and foliar cotton diseases. But these seedling diseases in the field, it is important to try to identify those so you can know that you have them in the field, and identify also the situation that allowed them to kill or harm your plant. And so those seedling disease pathogens can outright rot a seed. They can cause what's pre-emerge dampening off, where the plant dies before it's actually emerged, or it can cause post-emergence dampening off, where it does emerge but then it dies off afterwards, or again just stunted and reduced vigor. And so with that, really you want to make sure you have a good seed treatment on your variety, as well as you're planting into hopefully warmer soil temperatures and not sopping wet. The cool, wet soils are usually really going to increase your risk for seedling diseases. And so we do recommend, if possible, you want 3 consecutive days with a soil temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or greater, and that should definitely reduce your risk of seedling disease. So with that too, I want to mention another resource for seedling diseases, and that's the guide.utcrops.com website. This is a mobile-friendly field guide where you can see images of these different diseases, again, descriptions of the symptoms and the management options for each of them. So talking about our other below ground issue in cotton are nematodes. Nematodes are microscopic worms, if you will, that feed on the roots. And so you have reniform nematode, which is the most prevalent in Tennessee fields, especially continuous cotton fields. And with that, you can see that the only way you would see these nematodes is under a microscope, and here is pictured one, some of them feeding on the root tip or the growing point of a cotton root. And so again, that can also be the cause of stunted areas in a field. And the only way you're going to notice this is if you actually, or the only way you're going to know what the actual cause is if it's a nematode, is taking a soil sample. Outside of reniform nematode, we also have root knot nematode. And root knot nematode, while again you can't see the physical nematode when you dig up plant roots, you will see galling or these knots on the roots, hence root knot nematode. And so when you do see stunted growth, and especially sandier areas of a field, when you do examine those roots, you might see these galls or roots indicating you do have a root knot nematode issue. Again, a soil sample can confirm that and actually quantify your population. So to give you an example of taking a soil sample for nematodes, you would like to just use a soil probe as if you were taking a soil for fertility test. If possible, to push it all the way into the ground, anywhere from 6 to 10 inches is great to get that core. We do recommend, either picking management zones to sample from or doing a zigzag pattern to get a representative sample of your field, approximately 1 core per acre, depending on the amount of acreage you're trying to sample. And so the fall is the best time to take this sampling. So, but you could take it when plants are still in the field or after the fields of cotton has already been picked and the stalks have been bush hogged, as in we see here. The difference is, though, you do not want to go straight up and down in between the rows. That's not where the nematodes are going to be. You need to go just slightly 4 to 6 inches off of your row, angle that probe at a 45-degree angle, and then push it in. And again, then you would take that, knock it into a bucket, and go on and take your other cores. And then you would take all those cores that you've sampled and put them in a sealable Ziploc bag. Keep them in a cool place. Don't throw them on the dashboard of the truck. Preferably in the fridge overnight. And then ship it to either us here at the West Tennessee Research and Education Center or to other labs for nematodes to be screened. Switching gears now, we're going to look at above ground diseases of cotton. And so that includes our foliar pathogens, our boll rots, as well as our wilts. And so starting with our foliar diseases, we have ascochyta blight or wet weather. This is one you might see early in the season. It looks very similar to herbicide injury. Again, weather plays a very big role in this. You usually see it when there are consecutive wet, rainy days. And so again, early on, a good seed treatment might help with ascochyta blight, but most of the time as the weather dries up, the new foliage is not going to continue to get these leaf spots. Similarly, later in the season, only when necessary, a fungicide could help control ascochyta blight, but rarely has it ever been an issue that it calls for a fungicide in Tennessee. Other leaf spots you can see in the canopy, usually later in the season. You'll see these spots throughout the canopy. We call the leaf spot complex because there's 3 different pathogens that actually can cause these leaf spots. And it's very hard to diagnose between the 3 different pathogens just by looking at the leaf spots. We actually have to take the spores or the leaves back to the lab and look for spores under the microscope to identify which of the 3 pathogens are causing the leaf spot complex. We group them together also because they do not respond to a foliar fungicide. They're obligate fungal pathogens, meaning they're taking advantage of the plant because it's stressed. And there's multiple different stressors that can allow then those pathogens to attack the plant and cause those leaf spots. But the majority of the time it's going to be nutrient deficiency and potassium in particular. And so again, making sure you're identifying these as the leaf spot complex. The spots will be throughout the canopy, and that you check your soil and or nutrients in your leaf tissue to identify what nutrient might be lacking that's causing them to be able to attack the plant. Our other foliar pathogen is target spot. It's the one that's slightly newer to the scene since 2013 and 14. We saw the biggest year of it in 2016 when we had continuous rainy days with overcast cloudy days where that canopy just did not dry out. One of the key characteristics of this pathogen or this disease symptom is it starts in the lower canopy, usually only after the canopy is closed. And so again, rarely would you see these spots throughout the canopy. You'll only find them in the lower canopy, and then they will start to defoliate that lower canopy as it moves up into the middle canopy. So again, target spot to differentiate from other leaf spots, it's going to start in that lower canopy only, and then will move its way up as it defoliates. The other thing is its name, target spot, does indicate that you can see concentric rings in the lesion. And so this is the one foliar pathogen in cotton that can respond to a foliar fungicide. And again, when necessary, but this is on a field-by-field basis. So foliar fungicides dependent upon the growth stage. You want to look at what the current weather is and really what's the history in that field too. And all of those things will help give you an indication of what your risk is for yield loss due to target spot and if a foliar fungicide is needed. There are multiple fungicides labeled for cotton. Some do work better than others, but depending on your economic situation and your level of risk can indicate which one you might need to go with in your field. The optimal timing in Tennessee that we found for when a fungicide is recommended for protecting from target spot is usually around that 3rd week of bloom, or really the best timing is if we just wait to see those lesions begin in the lower canopy and then still address if we're early enough in the season that we need to protect that plant and keep those leaves on. Because really the main yield loss mechanism has been highly correlated to the defoliation that target spot causes and not necessarily just seeing the lesions. So again, the later fungicide applications, meaning anywhere from the 3rd week to the 5th week of bloom, have had the highest probability of protecting yield when needed in Tennessee. So one of the last leaf spots I'll talk about that ties into also boll rot is bacterial blight. So bacterial blight can get on the leaves and the bolls. You get water-soaked lesions, and these bacteria move within water drops. And so as expected, you would see water-soaked or darkened veins where a water droplet that had that bacteria ran down the leaf of the vein. And then similarly, where there's been insect damage on bolls, it provides an opening, a wound for bacteria as well as other fungal pathogens and bacterial pathogens to enter into the cotton boll and then over time rot it. Unfortunately, bacterial blight and boll rot, there's nothing that can be done about it after it's been seen in the field. Variety selection is your #1 defense for bacterial blight, as well as rotation and canopy management. And that also plays into helping reduce boll rot. But weather will also just really drive boll rot in certain varieties. But again, good canopy management, airflow in the canopy as best as possible will help reduce risk for bacterial or for boll rot, as well as then your variety selection and that canopy management for bacterial blight. One of the other diseases you can find in cotton are wilts. So we do want to make sure we're identifying an actual disease and not something more that's due to compaction or dry weather. But we do on occasion see wilts in our cotton, and that can be due to Fusarium or Verticillium wilt. In Tennessee in particular, it's usually mainly always Verticillium wilt. You can get discoloration on the leaves that can look like nutrient deficiency, but when you pull those plants up and you split the stems, you'll see discoloration in the vascular tissue, indicating you do have a wilt. And again, to treat this or manage this, you want to definitely pick a variety that is more tolerant or resistant to Verticillium wilt, and make sure you're properly irrigating and or putting in drainage tile where things are too wet. The last disease I'm going to talk about is a new virus that has been detected in cotton. Just in 2019 was the first year we identified this virus in cotton in Tennessee. But so far we are still investigating its possible impact on yield and cotton. And right now we don't have really anything new to report. This virus is vectored by aphids. But right now, again, we don't recommend changing any of our practices. You cannot control the aphid enough that you would actually reduce the virus in your field. But again, there are situations where we've detected the virus and have not had impact on yield. And other locations outside of the state, there have been yield losses reported. But we'll continue to investigate this virus and update the growers as we can, as soon as we get new information on this virus. So to wrap things up, again, there's a lot of different areas of a plant that different diseases can affect it. And how to identify it and manage it all depends on correctly examining an entire plant, as well as examining the pattern you're seeing in the field. And that means from lower to upper canopy, as well as across the pattern in the field. Because let's not forget, many of the calls I go on that are suspected to be diseases, about half of them or more turn out to be other issues, such as herbicide or chemical injury, planting issues, or nutrient issues. And so to keep in mind, we also have to rule out abiotic issues and not just be thinking only about diseases. And again, there's resources, more information, more detailed information on seedling and foliar diseases of cotton can be found at the Mylan No-Till website, their virtual tour from 2020. In the No-Till Cotton Tour, there's a seedling and foliar disease presentation. And then also the guide.utcrops.com mobile-friendly website that will allow you to see images of the diseases I've talked about, as well as management strategies. Thank you again for attending the 2020 UT Cotton Tour.